lot of Asian cultures, yes, there is rice at a lot of meals, but it's not the center of the meal. It's not the majority of the meal. And I just think about my journey, and every time I have a Korean dish, every bite, I just feel like I'm connecting more with my culture and what that means to me.
Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. I'm your host, Arely Gutierrez, a Latina registered dietitian, and I'm here to explore how cultural inclusivity can transform our approach to food, health, and well-being. Each episode aims to empower you to better understand and serve diverse communities with practical insights, personal stories, and expert advice. If you find this podcast valuable, don't forget to hit that follow button, leave us a review, and share it on your socials. You can find us as at Food Culture Curious. Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. My name is Arely. I'm a registered dietitian on a mission to promote cultural inclusion inside nutrition and healthcare. Today we have with us Sarah Crulcich. She is an award-winning food systems dietitian and holds a master's of public health and health promotion and health education with experience in agriculture, academic research, and food security. She has always been fascinated by food as it is political, an act of resistance, nourishment, and identity. Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. So, we're actually supposed to do this episode a year ago, and then I just fell off on my podcast for a bit. But for those of you that aren't from Houston, Sarah and I actually did an in-person dietitian meetup where Sarah took us to a Korean restaurant and she went into the background of some dishes, talking about not only what's in the dish, but what it means. So it was really fascinating to learn about you that day. And today, hopefully, we can talk a little bit about that for the people out there.
Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and let you get started. Just tell us a little bit about. I know when we had our Food Culture Curious meetup in person, you shared with us how you were trying to reconnect with your Korean culture, with your roots. And I feel like that's something that people of all types of diasporas can identify with, right? Especially, for example, if they're second or third generation, if there's been assimilation in the family or whatever circumstances that you feel
Mhm.
like you want to reconnect to that culture. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest, and at the time, I didn't have a lot of other people who looked like me that I felt like I could connect with in that way. I didn't grow up with the foods I identify with now, so I identify as Korean American. And so we had a lot of burgers, hot dogs, pasta, my mom's homemade chili, which was delicious growing up. But I didn't grow up with Korean foods. I didn't grow up around the language or learning about it. And so it's been a journey I have really been on for quite some time, learning little by little about what it means to be Korean American for me. And part of that connection has started with food and then a little bit with language, the music, learning to celebrate some of the Korean holidays and traditions as well. So I've done this process of reacculturation, right? Because I have been assimilated into Western culture and have been learning to regain Korean culture and what that looks like for me.
Beautiful. I know a lot of people really enjoy Korean food culture and would love to learn more. In just some general terms, what are some big staples that you see in Korean food culture?
Yeah, so when you are going out to restaurants, we're in Houston, right? Some that are a little more common to see in the restaurants around here might be something like bibimbap, and it simply just means it's some kind of rice bowl, rice dish. Typically, you'll see rice, and then you might see something like bokgoki, which is like a sweet beef on there. Another one that's super common might be japchae, and that one is a potato-based noodle, but it almost looks like a glass noodle. It looks kind of clear. It's a little chewy, and that has a variety of vegetables in it as well. You will always see kimchi served on the side, which is a fermented cabbage. That's the most common type of kimchi. and that is really making its way as some people are labeling it as a superfood of sorts. And then with Korean food, you often see these little dishes served with the meal. Those are called banchan, and they look like appetizers, and you can eat them before too, that's fine. But they're also meant to be enjoyed with the meal and to help complement the different foods that you're having. And then you also have street foods that are really making their way into our culture here. Korean hot dogs. So on the outside, those are actually rice flour based, super crunchy. It's a little bit different from the type of corn dogs we're used to. And then you might have heard of Korean fried chicken. So that's double fried, and that's how it gets so crispy. And that actually comes from the Korean War and has an interesting background story to it. There are some really heavy dishes like Korean army stew, also from the Korean War, but that has ramen. It has little sausages in it, tofu. It has spam, which is a popular food that has made its way into several different cultures because of war. And
Mhm.
it will have some vegetables in there as well, but it's meant to be very hearty because it was supposed to keep the soldiers fueled and to keep them satisfied.
Awesome. I want to dig a little bit deeper into the Korean fried chicken you mentioned. You said there was an interesting story behind it. Do you know a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I can share what I know. I did a fellowship called the Ukombozi Fellowship, and so that is for people who want to dive into their anti-racism leadership journey and what does it mean to grow as a leader in that, but also be humbled a lot because, of course, no one's perfect, and we're all going to do and say things that aren't always consistent with what we want to project to the world. And so, yeah, it was a lot of practicing humility. And one of our projects was a purpose project. We got to do any topic we wanted. And I knew that I wanted to do mine on different types of food and like how can we use food as liberation. And one of the things I found just researching for different parts of that was the origins of Korean fried chicken. And it's not super well documented from what I could find because, like much of history, it becomes oral history, right? And that kind of changes as it's passed down from person to person. And so this was during the Korean War in the 1950s. And it was when the Korean soldiers would be around making food, and you would have the black soldiers from the US who would dine with them because it wasn't usually accepted for them to dine with the white soldiers from the US. And I've heard people say Black culture and Korean culture, sometimes people feel connected, like there's some crossover there. And I always kind of wonder if that was possibly part of why, because those soldiers spend time together. But yeah, so they kind of just mixed their different methods of the spices from Korean culture and some of the frying methods from Black culture. And they came up with what we know now as Korean fried chicken.
That's amazing. And I love hearing about, obviously, this happens all over the world, right? Like when I had my friend, she's a dietitian and she's Peruvian, and she talked about the Asian influence in Peruvian food. Like all over the world, people start combining their cooking methods and something beautiful happens.
Yeah, it's a really unique blend that I don't think until you start digging you find out. And even within that, I told the one that was most common that I found written. Even beyond that, though, there's different variations of that story. And so it definitely keeps you on your toes. And for me, it just makes me want to know more about what's out there.
Awesome. And then, of course, you mentioned the banchans, and there's so many of them. Oh my goodness, a lot of different variations. Is there any that you're particular to or that you keep in your house?
Honestly, I will go to H Mart or 99 Ranch to buy them. I think I often hear that in Korean households, they will make them by batch, right? So
Hmm.
that they have them available because they will have them at every meal. So I will tend to go to H Mart or 99 Ranch for they are pre-made. And of course, I'll have some kimchi on hand. I'm not a spicy person. They can make it non-spicy, but it is difficult to find. There's a potato one that's in a red sauce, a gochujang sauce. I'm not sure if it's exactly that though. And then there'll be sprouts with vinegar in them, fish cakes. I love fish cakes. And I did challenge myself earlier this year to try to incorporate one Korean dish into my food for the week. And so I was good until probably week 7, and then I need to pick that back up. I thought that was a cool way just to keep myself learning and help me feel connected to the culture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I try to, because unfortunately, I feel like when I went to school for dietetics, I received a lot of Western culinary instruction. Do you know what I mean? How we're taught that broccoli and grilled chicken breasts and brown rice are healthy and your cultural foods are unhealthy. So I think I got into the habit of making more westernized dishes, and I'm trying to make an effort to also incorporate my own cultural food. So my goal this week is to make albondigas, which is like a meatball soup. And I know the dishes aren't particularly complicated, but it's still important for me to learn them and pass it on. I did not grow up learning how to cook from my parents or my grandma. They just instilled in me, just focus on studying, focus on studying. So great, I became a professional, but now I have to work on myself to learn all the homemade dishes that I didn't learn with them.
Mm. Yeah. And that makes me think too. I'm curious if you agree with this. I feel like when we talk about food in the healthcare system and public health, it's such a catch-22. And for example, for a long time, people have said Asian foods, generally speaking, are so healthy and they have a lot of vegetables and there's tofu, which is great for you. And of course, kimchi, which is being known for its prebiotic benefits. And at the same time, I feel like people will say, "Oh, I ate so bad this weekend. I had Asian food," or MSG is giving me all these different
Yes.
headaches, or they eat too much meat in these certain Asian cultures. It's not good for you. And so it's which would you like it to be? We can't pick and choose. Perhaps like any other culture, it has a balance of all these different foods, right? And so maybe we shouldn't be putting it on such a big pedestal and then also trying to drag it down.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when I talk to people about being culturally inclusive with their diet, with their meals, with their plans, they have this idea, like the stigma that, for example, in my Hispanic population, that they need to give up complete items. No more rice, no more tortillas, no more this, no more that. Like all of that's bad for you, right? They moralize the food and just teaching them that yes, there are some dishes that are more celebratory that we have every once in a while that maybe we shouldn't be having every single day, but there's a balance that we can make, right? There's cooking methods that we can try, there's ingredients we can adjust, but it's not an all or nothing. Our food isn't bad or good. It's just how we're preparing it in that meal and what our particular health goals are. Because what might be suitable for someone else might not be suitable for you, and vice versa. So there's just a lot of nuance to it.
I also think it's silly that if you were talking to, for example, a white person that grew up in the US and maybe you're counseling them on diabetes, typically no one says, "Oh, you have to stop eating so many cultural foods, stop eating so many hamburgers and hot dogs and things like that." But we're so willing to do that for someone else who comes from a different culture. We're so ready to tell them, "Stop eating rice," even though we have new research to say that day-old rice or even frozen rice, there are components of it that become starch resistant. And so that is perhaps a better option for blood sugar control than having fresh rice, which I think is something that I love sharing with people because they have been told so quickly once they get told they have prediabetes or diabetes, no more rice. And a lot of Asian cultures, yes, there is rice at a lot of meals, but it's not the center of the meal. It's not the majority of the meal. And I just think about my journey and every time I have a Korean dish, every bite, I just feel like I'm connecting more with my culture and what that means to me. But at the same time, I also see a lot of Korean Americans being told, "You're not truly Korean. You're not Korean enough.
Mhm.
You wouldn't be welcome." back in Korea because you haven't been here and you don't eat the way we do. You don't speak Korean as well as we do. And it's really hurtful to hear that from people that you think you would identify with. And I just think about that when I hear patients tell me, and they're from a different culture, and they're saying, the doctor told me no more tortillas, they told me no more rice, and they told me this and that is bad for me. And it's just such a negative message. And I just think about how much that would tear me down after hearing people that I would thought would be part of my community saying, you're not enough to be a part of this. And then the one thing I might have is, oh, but I really feel connected when I have bibimbap after a long day. That helps me feel connected to my culture, which is, again, that's a rice dish. And then what if I see a doctor and they say, no more rice? That would really tear at my identity. And I think that is something that I hold dearly to me and is why it hurts me so much to hear people in the community say that they've been told that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've ever watched Selena, but there's a line in the movie where they talk about how if you're a Mexican American, you have to be more American than the Americans and more Mexican than the Mexicans. Both sides will try to make you feel like you don't belong. And then to your point, of course, it's very pervasive that the Hispanic population will hear once they get prediabetes or diabetes, no tortillas, no rice, no everything that's so important to you and part of your cultural identity. They want to take it away from you and not give it a second thought. It's crazy. But that's why we're here. We're culturally inclusive dietitians that are gonna help you reach your health goals while enjoying your cultural foods and following your traditions so you can continue to celebrate with your family. And speaking of which, I know that there's a few Korean traditions that you mentioned as far as holidays and traditions around birthdays, things like that. Can you share with us a little bit about those traditions, if you learned about any or if you're following any now?
Yeah, so one takes place in the fall. It's the Mid-Autumn Festival. And I have not seen it in practice. If people listening to this or watching on Instagram have info about it too, I would encourage them to engage and make a comment, share with everyone. But yeah, so you make a lot of kimchi. The whole community gets together. So you have enough kimchi to get you through the winter season. But the part that really sticks out to me, though, is just how much the community comes together. And you were speaking about commonalities with culture not being enough of this and not being enough of that. And I think
Mhm.
there's a commonality here too with Hispanic culture in that I've heard when you make tamales, you make a lot at once. And it can be a thing where the whole family gets together. And so it makes me think of that when I think of the Mid Autumn Festival and everyone getting together to make the kimchi. And then, of course, we have Lunar New Year, which is Chinese New Year. And that is a celebration, and we will have an altar, and then you also have meals with your family. Of course, in Korean tradition, compared to Chinese culture, for example, we only celebrate 3 days technically. It's a smaller celebration. You get together with your nucleus family and grandparents, and then you would have a bowing ceremony to the grandparents, and that's a great sign of respect, and that's a very big part of the tradition. And it's silly because I remember learning about this and I was like, oh man, but I thought there was going to be like lion dances and the dragon dance and stuff. I guess that's so common in Vietnamese and other cultures. And so I adopt different parts, right? I celebrate different parts with friends and family, of course. And I think that's one of the things that's so nice about where we live in Houston is that is encouraged so much. But yeah, so one of my favorite fruits I've actually have found through connecting with Korean culture is the apple pear, also called the Korean pear. So it's a cross between the apple and the pear, and it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And I got to share that with my team at work this year, and everyone loved it. And it just something so simple as that just made me feel really proud and connected and just happy to be a Korean American. And then another one is on your birthday, you have a rice cake soup, and that's supposed to signify you're turning a year older. They are cut into little coin shapes, the rice cakes, And so that's meant to be like also a sign of prosperity. And you'll have that with Lunar New Year as well.
That's awesome. I love the food symbolisms of prosperity. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So, I love that you work with Diversify Dietetics. I think it's very important, right? Especially for a profession that's 80% white females or something around that. Can you talk to us a little bit about your collaborations with Diversify Dietetics? Have you done anything in the cultural inclusion space?
Yeah, I am proud to say I'm a Diversify Dietetics day one person, which means from the moment I feel like the first week they were on Instagram, I was already following them, engaging with them, which is really fun. And it just happened to be I was moving to Houston for my dietetic internship. Yes, as they were starting up and got to be at the first Houston Diversify Dietetics meetup. And one of the co-founders, Deanna, was in Houston at the time. And so got to engage with her there. And it was super helpful as an intern to be able to have that community there and to be able to connect with other people and just know if I had a really long day, I had people that I could go to and debrief about anything that might be going on. So I have been a guest on some of their webinars, and then I have hosted other meetups in Houston. I will be hosting one in April. I don't know if this will be out by then, April 25th. So if there are any Houston dietitians or dietitian to bees that would like to join, that information will be on the Diversify Dietetics website.
Wonderful. I, for one, plan to be there. We're doing a grow your own herbs class. So,
Yes, grow your own herbs garden, and it'll be on a farm, Finca Robles, which is a farm in the East End. And I just love what they do to improve food access in that community and what they do to provide a third space for people.
yeah, that's awesome. And I love following your Instagram and seeing you grow all the different plants. And you have a really awesome green thumb that I want to learn more with how to do those kinds of things because I know nothing about planting and growing.
Yeah, I think gardening is the first slow activity I've done. I do yoga now, but for a long time I never really took to it. I took to gardening before I took to yoga. And it can definitely be a workout too, but it's very grounding. I've never just sat and looked at plants growing until I started a garden or just watched a bee fluttering around. I'm not afraid of different insects now because I understand what they're doing in the garden. I don't know. I just think it's a slippery slope. Now I also try to make paper, like craft paper from scraps. I love to compost. I try to go foraging when I have an experienced person with me. And I want to just, I don't know, learn to make and do so many other things now along the lines of homesteading. And yeah, it's gardening is a slippery slope to all of that.
But like you mentioned, that does sound very grounding and peaceful, and I feel like a lot of us could use more of that.
Yeah, and I think it's just cool to see how food grows. And as a dietitian, I think some of the nutrients, I don't know, they just click more after I see how they grow and everything it takes to go into that. And you have plants that require a lot of nutrients and a lot of water, like tomatoes. And it's very fulfilling to see that. And it's made me appreciate farmers and having a local food system so much more because you have one super hot day, you have one windy day, one storm blow through. And for my garden, that could be it. My whole season could be over when
Yeah.
certain things like that happened. Yeah, it's just really interesting to think about.
Yeah, so it really makes you appreciate what goes into actually growing food and how food ends up
Hmm.
on our plate.
Yeah, and just learning to plant seeds and harvesting seeds. And I think that's a little bit where it comes in as this is a resistance as well too, because you have to have those seeds in order to have that item the next season. And you have to make sure that you have the soil to make it grow properly. And yeah, it just really makes me think about history and just how political food is.
I love that. That's beautiful. Perfect. I just want to take this time to thank you so much for being here, Sarah, and for everything you shared with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I think the more dietitians we see talking about these type of things, the more normal it'll become. And I think that's a great thing.
Wonderful. All right, everyone. We'll catch you next time. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/food culture curious. Or as always, you can support by sharing, following, or rating this podcast. Every click from y'all means the world to me. And now for a quick disclaimer. Food Culture Curious is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not take the place of medical advice from licensed healthcare professionals. If you need to seek medical advice, please speak to your healthcare provider. Thank you for listening.